Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I am Sarah Traver. I'm the gallery director here, and this is Rachel Moore, and she is our esteemed artist. And it's a real treat to have you here all the way from Vermont. So thank you so much for coming out and joining us.
Yeah.
We're kind of a small group, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's the intrepid folks that make it out. So thank you all very much. We're videoing tonight, so Rachel and I have our masks off, and we'll just try and keep our distance from you all. But we are vaccinated, so should be pretty safe. Hopefully everyone's comfortable with that.
We'll stay over here.
Yeah, we'll stay on this side. So we're just going to keep this really casual and just have a conversation with Rachel about her work and this exhibition and her career as an artist. Probably talk for about 20 minutes or so, and then open it up to question and answer from you guys, with you guys. And then if there's any time afterwards, we can all hang out and look at the work together. And explore the other shows in the gallery and stay for a glass of wine if you'd like. So, and I think that's it. I don't have to do any of the normal Zoom housekeeping, which is really nice to have an in-person event again.
Yeah, I know.
So Rachel, this is probably your, I'm going to guess here, I should have looked this up, but maybe 4th or 5th solo exhibition with Traver Gallery in probably the last, I don't know, more than 15 years.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. If we're counting, yeah.
Yeah, and actually I think one of the very first exhibitions that I got to help mount when I started in the gallery in the early 2000s was one of your exhibitions in our Tacoma gallery. So this is a really kind of special thing for me to get to do this show with you and revisit that. So can you tell us, the show title is The Rising Sea, and can you talk a little bit about what that title refers to and sort of the inspiration for this body of work?
Sure, yeah, so I started this body of work a few years ago, and when I was part of an exhibition that was on climate change, and it was specifically related to Hurricane Irene, and it was, I think, the 5-year anniversary, and so that had impacted a lot of places, but Vermont at the time, and so there was an invitation to commission me to do a body of work for this, and so I started thinking a lot about water and climate change and migration, because I had been thinking a lot about how it impacted people, and how those, like the climate and social justice, kind of overlapped, and so I started with this, the idea of like thinking about so many people at the time. I think there's a lot of conversation politically about climate change isn't real or it's not caused by humans, and so I was really interested in doing some research and presenting sort of the facts or like the scientific evidence, and so I thought, well, I'm going to focus on these climate change indicators and looking at those to see how we're actually measuring climate change and what it looks like and what these scientific devices are doing, and kind of raise awareness in that way. And a lot of the images that I was seeing, or that we all probably saw from photojournalists, certainly then fast forward a little bit to migration and thinking about all of the refugees that we were seeing, and how some of those were impacted. Some of those were a result of obviously political wars, and some of them, a lot of images that I was seeing as I was researching climate migration, still happening like on these makeshift rafts, very similar to this, and then also on some of the boats that are outside. And so anyway, I started with this piece actually, and thinking about like the drifter buoys, they're called, and they have this scientific, a lot of the electronics and the battery are in this part of it, and then they actually have this long, what they call like a sock that comes out and is the anchor to it, but which isn't on these pieces, but I remember seeing an image of them kind of being pulled up by this big crane from the sea, and it was like this collection. So it's like, so I think I called this Drifters Pulled from the Sea, and it was just this collection of these scientific devices that were measuring climate change. I mean, they also have a function where there are about 1,000 of these throughout the world that scientists collect data. And so these are, yes, there are a lot of satellites that also help with this, but these are sort of the on-the-ground collectors, and they can actually measure the currents. And so they're used a lot for to measure the currents. I mean, change in sea level, temperature, barometric pressure, but also where the ocean, you know, if there's, for example, if there's an oil spill, then this actually helps people figure out where it's going, and then they can figure out where they need to implement the cleanup crew. So anyway, so it started with this, and I got really interested in this shape as just this beautiful shape. And as I saw that image, I thought, it's like a chandelier, you know, as I saw it in this, that's how it kind of came to me. And so I think a lot of the work that is like, I see as this like beautiful thing, but also there's another side to it, certainly, so.
Yeah, can you, I mean, I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about this exhibition is that you clearly use sort of beauty as kind of a point of entry to have this conversation about something that's a much larger and very important topic. And I think it's always interesting to me to see how artists sort of approach big topics like that and use their sort of visual language to sort of pull people in. And I think I love that about your work, that like it's not, you don't hit us over the head with it, right? There's a lot of pieces in this room that are very quiet, and they allude to something. And then there's also pieces in the room that are very explicitly saying what you are sort of engaging with. How do you, when you're in the studio and kind of working with these ideas and working out how you want to represent them, how do you approach that? Is that something you think about, or?
I think it's probably, I mean, I think part of it is just the way that I work, and then part of it is that I prefer to make things that are really beautiful and soft and quiet. And I feel like there are other parts of my practice, like social practice or curatorial practice, that can be more action-based and a little bit louder. But when I'm doing this work, I think that part of it is a response to how I'm seeing the world, and as like, you know, an empath, just there's so much emotion and feeling, and I kind of distill it into this sort of poetic way of working. And I think that it's, I'm not as interested in making work that is like the boats outside. I wasn't interested in filling them with people and having it be an immediately like very sad or somber piece. I was kind of more interested in looking at this vessel, and it's, you know, maybe very simply painted, and then it's not until you really look at the title and then you start to think about it that it could be this either symbol of hope or this symbol of, you know, potentially like devastation or urgency or emergency. And so I think I'm really drawn to work. I love Ai Weiwei's work. I love, you know, there's so many artists that I think have made such a huge impact in activism but I prefer to just do things in a quieter way that kind of lets people enter in and maybe just appreciate it, so that if somebody doesn't really want to think about climate change, or, I mean, I hope that they do, but they can just enjoy the pieces as they are, but yeah. So.
You, and I'm sorry for putting you on the spot because you probably aren't going to remember the exact quote, but you just told me a quote a few minutes ago about that sort of like the way we kind of process memory or experience emotion.
Yeah.
Can you try and share that?
So, so I was sharing with Sarah earlier that I was struck by this quote by Virginia Woolf, and I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly because I just read it. So, but she was talking about how you don't have the, basically you don't have this ability to expand upon emotion in the present. It's only in looking at the past that you can really fully unpack the emotion of something, or what, the meaning of something that's happened. So it's only kind of on reflecting and looking back that you really can fully understand what something is about, or what the complexity of the emotion. And so we were talking about that because you asked about some of the work, and some of it I have this like concrete idea of, okay, I need to have this, and whether it's based on extensive research like this, and some of these that do not pick up with the gooseneck barnacles, or if it's more of this like visceral interpretation and response to what we're all reading and in the news and the current issues, and then it comes with like, oh, I just need to do this piece, or I just know that I have to, it needs, those pieces over there need to be in ceramic, and with this like umbilical like cord, or this black that's kind of messy tying them together but also falling down. So I don't really quite sometimes know what that means in the present. I just know that I need to just make it, and then it's sometimes not till after that I'm thinking that I have that time and space to think about it.
How did you learn to trust yourself with that as an artist? I mean, that's a pretty intuitive process that I think a lot of people would have the tendency to sort of second guess or like set aside, because it doesn't necessarily fit with the thing that's at hand at the moment.
I think it was easier. It was easier to do before school, but I think it's really interesting because I feel like I was pretty comfortable working in that way, and then it wasn't until, I always grew up with this idea that I'm sure my parents instilled in me this idea that like the world can be a better place and you need to leave it in better condition than, and so I think that's always been there, but I was trusting my intuition a little bit more early on, and then it's interesting, there was this moment where I was just trying really hard to kind of merge everything or do more or figure out how to kind of make change, and it wasn't working. Like it was very challenging to kind of mash it all together, and so I had these like disparate practices where I'd have my social practice where I was working with communities, and like right now I'm working on an art and justice project about racial justice with a community, and then I have my studio practice that was so separate, where I just kind of processed all of this information, and it seems like there have been moments where I feel like I have to just I come back to that moment where I'm like, I just have to keep trusting myself, and to know like I just have to keep making and see what's gonna, try and then sometimes naturally, like with this kind of work, it comes together. So, and some of the work, it's more just like this poetic gesture or an emotional response, and there's not such deep meaning and content, behind it. But.
Yeah. This particular exhibition is actually comprised of pieces that are not all brand new pieces. Some of the work is new, and some of the work, it comes from bodies of work that you had done previously, and you're sort of recontextualizing it. And I know you thought a lot about what it meant to do an exhibition like this here in the Pacific Northwest. Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of conceived of what pieces would be part of this show? And
Sure. Yeah, so so that exhibition that I was in Vermont, where I was commissioned to do this work, the buoys basically, and then I did a couple of the boat drawings that are outside, and I did a version of this, but it was just a singular raft. And then so for this, but I was really interested in continuing that because it was something that I continued to kind of research and investigate, and I've always been really interested in taking these like scientific facts and then and blending those with making them more about the human experience, the individual human experience. And so I would take bits of oral history or narrative that people were interviewed about their experience either migrating or with some sort of natural disaster, and I would take those quotes and intersperse them with the scientific facts like you see along the wall. And so these pieces are all new, the laser cut works, and then some of the boat drawings out there are new. And so it's like just trying to, this piece is new and this one and that one. And so I'm really interested in this work, in the theme. And so I just took some of the pieces to expound upon and see like what's next, or what is it looking like now, and how are we moving forward. And so yeah. It's like an ongoing, I mean, it's not going to go away, so I can keep working with this theme for a while.
Yeah.
But
and in fact, some of the things, I mean, you pointed out that like one of the laser cut pieces, the numbers are out of date.
Yeah.
And like that's just going to keep happening. That number is just so rapidly changing that like, it marks this particular moment in time. Yeah. But it's not a positive marker necessarily.
It's not. I know that the one
worse.
over there, it's like 250 million people will be displaced by the year 2050, and now that was just a couple years ago that I pulled that statistic, and now it's like 500 or 1 billion. It's like the number, depending on the resource, is changing, and it's surprising, but not really, because you look and see like the fires here, and then on the West Coast, and in Greece and Turkey, and Haiti's earthquake, and then tropical storm, and the flooding in Germany, and there are more and more tropical storms every year. There's more flooding. There's more more variance in temperature shifts, and the sea level, I think, has risen more in the past decade than the last 100 years. So it's really something to that we're going to have to do something about pretty soon. But so
we hope so. Do you mind? So I didn't do much of an introduction because I figured we'd talk a little bit about kind of your background and kind of what you're doing today and where you see yourself going. So you have a connection to the Pacific Northwest. You were here for many years. How did you find yourself in Seattle? And
so, oh boy, okay. So it's really interesting because I'm looking around, and of the people that are here, I'm like, every part of my life almost, except for Greece, is represented. I've got like Emily from high school, and Kate from Alfred, and Jackie from Vermont, and Jen from SAIC. So all of these, it's so fun. It's really pretty awesome. But so after I graduated Alfred, I went to Pilchuck to work and I worked there for a few months, and then I met Benjamin Moore, and he asked me if I would want to be an intern, a free girl, at his studio. So I said yes, and he said, well, when can you move here? And can you move here by September 4th? And that was like giving me, I don't know, like 4 days to move, to grab my stuff from across the country and move, you know, all the way to Seattle, because at that time I was in New York. And so, of course, I said yes immediately, and so I started working for him, and then he hired me, and so it was a pretty special thing that I was able to do that and be, you know, influenced and just sort of guided and mentored by Benny and everybody that I worked for at the time, Dante and Richie and Preston, and so it was pretty amazing, and that's how I ended up in Seattle for a number of years.
I just wanted to take 1 second
Yeah.
to acknowledge
Thank you.
the.
I'm having a hard,
Yeah.
just taking a moment.
So, I mean, one of the reasons that you're here this weekend is to go to Benny's memorial, because we tragically lost one of our most important artists. So, anyway, I'm getting all
I know.
teary-eyed about it, but yeah, so I just want to acknowledge that for those who are kind of watching this. This is also a really sad moment for a lot of us, but a wonderful tribute to him that you're here having this show, and that he was such a mentor to you, and it's pretty special that that's kind of coming full circle.
For sure. He and his wife Deb, and who I work for too, and it's pretty special. And since we're taking a moment, I just want to take a moment for Jackie Pancari too, who just passed away, and she was another special person. Kate and I had a residency with her at Pilchuck, and anyway, she was really influential too. So yeah, it's bittersweet to be here, but I'm really thankful. So that's how I got here, and
And where are you now?
So now I'm in Vermont. I think I had this amazing experience in Seattle, and had a lot of encouragement from you and a lot of other people to, with exhibitions and grants, and I was trying to figure out what's next, how can I have a greater impact, and I went to the Art Institute of Chicago, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, for graduate school, mostly to focus on social practice or public art, and try and figure out how I can sort of reconcile these two disciplines or work in a larger arena. And then after that I went to Greece on a Fulbright, and then I went to Vermont, which is where I am now, and I got into curating at the Current and then Helen Day Art Center, which is a center for contemporary art in Stowe, Vermont. And so now I'm the director there, and chief curator, and
a mom,
and an artist, and so it's really
busy schedule.
Pretty busy schedule, but.
So are you looking forward to, do you have any residencies on the horizon, or?
Yeah, actually, I was invited by the mayor of this little town in Italy to do a residency, and by someone I know, Todd Brown, and an artist there who's trying to put together this artist colony. So that's there, and then there's, but I don't know when because of this pandemic. I'm just kind of waiting. And then there's another project in Greece that I'm hoping to go back. I've been doing projects there since my Fulbright, working with a collaborator over there, and kind of melding oral histories and public art and digital media. So it's more of this, and working with youth. So it's kind of this collaborative teaching sort of project. But so hopefully going back there soon. So.
Is this the sort of artist life that you envision? I mean, you have your hands in so many different things, and you've had so many different experiences, whether it's a Fulbright fellowship or working at Benny's on a glassblowing team, and really deeply learning a craft, or curating. I just imagine that all of those things must influence you in so many wonderful ways. Do you think it's changed your work? Do you?
I think that, I mean, definitely it's changed and influenced my work. I think that it's, I don't know if I can pinpoint on the spot how, but I feel like I'm always moving and interested in sort of new challenges and keeping, I don't know, vibrant and engaged and in the world, and trying to figure out how to, I don't know, like make it better, make a difference, or do something. And so I think that I am, you know, constantly trying to do that with these different pieces of my life and practice, and I don't know, it keeps me really engaged, even though sometimes it can feel a little bit too busy, but but I don't know.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you want to touch on about this exhibition before I turn it over to questions?
Yeah, questions are great.
Yeah.
Are all these movies glass?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat questions just for the sake of video. Are all of these buoys glass?
All of the buoys are glass. The ones that have the barnacles, the gooseneck barnacles, the barnacles are ceramic, and then the other part is glass. So.
And did you blow all the glass?
So these were actually done many years after I left Benny's, so I hadn't been practicing for a while. So Devin Burgess, who's a good friend, and I went to Alfred with, helped, he gaffed these for me, so it was really fun because I hadn't been in the studio in a while, and I knew what I wanted, so exactly what I wanted, and so I went to him and he generously just offered to help, and I got to be his assistant and be in the studio, so yeah, it was great.
Any other questions for Rachel?
Why are the umbilical horns, why are they flattened? Why are they what? Flattened. I think it's just that's part of the nature of when I soak them in ink and to get them black, and because they're just these latex tubes that are used for generally for in the medical field, and so I soak them and they kind of stick together, and I just, some places they're not totally flat, but I really like how raw and gnarly they look when they're kind of flat and like they're used or they've gone through something.
It just seems like some of the work is very perfectly shaped, and then some of the work is very organic or very not the same perfectly shaped. And I was just wondering about the relationship between the pieces, like the inner tube tires, the refugee kind of look to those, like how they're supposed to be saving people, and sort of that relationship between the two different kinds of work.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, this piece, this is like something that I had seen. Obviously, it wasn't white, and but it was like this, these rafts that were just bound together, sticks bound together, and people just in there trying to get from one place to another. It wasn't like they were trying to move from one place to another or go to another. They were just, their town had flooded, and they were trying to get from like their house to the other, the other side, or, and it just kind of, I think about this thing that's like sort of, in one way it's white and pristine, but it's also kind of battered looking, and I think that there's something really beautiful when you make it all white, that it's sort of like this memorial or this like ghost of what's happened, this kind of relic, but it's still, when you paint something white, you can almost see the kind of wear and tear a little bit more, and all sort of subtle and beautiful, but it's also like, I don't know, some things are a little bit, I think seeing that roughness, but in something that's totally white is, or one color, whether it's black or there's something really beautiful about it, but also, I don't know, haunting or more visceral, tragic. And tragic, that's a good word. And I think that, you know, my inclination as an artist is like sometimes to do things so tight and pretty and neat and you know, like this, like so carefully done, but or the laser cut, but I've been trying to like explore doing more, getting a little bit messier. This is like, that's messy for me, and the barnacles are like messy. And then trying to see, there's so many like sketches I do in my studio where I just kind of put things up and like this, and sometimes it feels like they're, I can't use them, you know, they're not done, but I've been more and more comfortable with like, this is finished piece, this is it, but it's hard for, like, it's pushing my comfort level as a pristine artist to, you know. Yeah.
I liked how earlier when you were talking about the hanging blue piece, how, like, of course you want people to think about climate change, but you don't necessarily want it to be like super explicit, like this is about climate change. People can just enjoy the sculpture as it is. But I like how you have text on some of the pieces, and then there's some really, really explicit laser cut text that's included. So I was wondering if you could like elaborate on the relationship between like the text, like the basic exhibition as a whole, and like why you chose the words that you did.
Why I chose the words like in there that I did, or on the titles, or both? Or
Sorry, the words on the words that were hanging up, and then the words on the buoys.
oh yeah, so the words on the buoys, actually, the do not pick up, that's what a lot of them are spray painted like that, so that people, fishermen or people that would maybe come across them don't pick them up. So because they're collecting scientific data. And so those are actually, that text is on the real buoys. So they look really similar to that, except obviously they would be like red and cream color. And then the text in the laser cut pieces, that's, you know, I think that what I want to do, I was really interested in like the intersection of the data points and then someone's actual experience, because, you know, when you hear the news or you read statistics or doing all this research, it's you can just like turn it off, and it's you can just not pay attention to it. And then for me anyway, when I hear someone tell me their experience about how they personally were impacted by a flood or an earthquake or a fire, it resonates with me a lot more. And so I think that treating these as like these very clean, white, simple, almost like lines of a poem or something, that you can, they're kind of, if you look at it like, Sarah, I think you were saying it's like an object, treating it like an object on its own. For me, it still kind of looks like this beautiful, like, for example, if you couldn't read English or something, it's a beautiful object maybe, and it kind of lets you come in because of the delicacy of the way that it's done, or the starkness of the white with just a hint of this burning, searing, and then you read it and it's like, sometimes it's a little, maybe it's beautiful, maybe it's a little bit sad,
Yeah, I think also, and I don't know if this is how you approached it, but for me, looking at it in the gallery, just reading a single statement like the sea is rising, which is of course factually true, like it's a measurable thing that we all are hearing and reading about on a daily basis, but when you put it in this context and you present it that way, it also like reads almost as poetry and like is the like kind of unfolds and tells a whole other story. Like what does that even mean, the sea is rising? Like yes, of course there's the concrete examples of folks in Florida having to think about this on a daily basis, but it's also like this flood, like almost like an emotional flood, or these other things that it calls to mind. And I think presenting words in this way has a really kind of wonderful effect.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've always been really strongly influenced by poetry. Maybe, you know, my father's a writer. I grew up reading a lot of poetry, and I think that there's something that when I would read poetry, if it, you know, you have that like beauty of the language, and as an artist, you have, you know, your language is, it can be textual, but it can also be, it's visual mostly, and so to kind of have this way to enter into this, the beauty of this language, and then to really kind of uncover what it means is, if, you know, to be able to, I don't know, tease it out is kind of.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, that feels so true of all of your work, is that there is this sort of poetry to it. And, you know, as is true with all poetry, it's a little bit difficult to like pinpoint meanings or be specific, because it isn't it's intended to sort of pull at an emotional space and tease out different feelings in different people, and I think it's really effective.
Thanks.
Other questions from folks? It's very hot in here, so we could adjourn to the other room and socialize for a few minutes. But I don't want to miss an opportunity to. Yeah. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah, Bill, for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
That's our pleasure.